ABBA 3. Testimonials, Questions and Answers. December 7, 2018. ABBA is ours and fills everyone's heart. Thus, we establish ourselves in our one presence, in peace, in embracing, in the heart of the moment as well as in the heart of eternity. May the peace in each one be spread in his unity and in his truth. Beloved Abbas, resound in the same heart. In silence as in my words, but also in his word, truth unfolds, revealing joy and simplicity. Let us embrace one another, in the joy of the Agape, in the joy of truth. Beloveds of the One, it is time to let you express what may still seem to you, and temporarily delays you, in this unfolding of the Agape. Do not restrict any of your words, so that everyone can resonate and be there, beyond any distance and fragmentation. So all of us, here and everywhere, in the resonance of the Abbas, embrace all his words. Then, beloved, we listen to you and await you, with your testimony, in your presence and in your words, to share the gift of grace, to commune, in this sacred space, that of your heart, of the space of truth and of the time of truth, so that all veils may be consumed in a fire of joy and bliss. So beloved ones, you're invited to come and speak with each of the Abbas who embrace you and listen to you right now. So who wants to say what he is living at this moment, what he wants to share, what he wants to give, so that all of us, together, can resonate with his presence and joy, as well as in his pain, whatever it may be. Then come to me, so that I can tell you what is happening to you right now. Don't put barriers, don't put limits to what your person or your heart means. So we embrace you to listen to his voice, whatever his words or his word, the same embrace is reserved for everyone. It is an embrace without restrictions, an embrace in truth. Then you're invited and we wait for you in silence, so that the loved ones present here can come and give their word. We're waiting for you. Who wants to express themselves? I'm Patricia, I will tell you another Italian story. Let's go. There is a translator, since most people speak Spanish. Participant. Influenced by the great actors of the people where I am, coming here, listening to our friend Jean-Luc, this has been an immense story, why all the things I've done in my life, all the crazy things I've had in my life, I've never been able to understand what was happening, feeling guilty for every step I took. Obviously you're talking about your whole life, this one. Participant. Yes, this life. In fact, when I came here and found us all together, all of a sudden, everything fell down, all the stages that I had set up myself fell down, and I realized that it was a big scene in which I was a very big actress during all that role, and the fact that everything fell down, I felt in me a big scene, a great joy, very great, because before, at the time of the sufferings I was experiencing, I really felt the deep of suffering, I felt like an actress of director failing me, and therefore I realized that this was just a film, and this had a great consequence on my heart, and I could feel an immense joy. So I understood it, but it's not understanding, it's an inner feeling to realize that everything has been a fiction within myself, to be able to feel, to perceive all this, to have lived in person with all its intensity and in the first person, to be able to see the character and realize that she was no longer the actress, this has been a truth that I have always sought. I hadn't understood everything I could understand today, that this joy that I felt I was doing like a click, was great, greater than all the orgasms I had in my life. Laughs. Beloved, it was worth being there. I hope you don't have any problems with your husband. Laughs. Participant. No, because it wasn't worth continuing with the same actor. Laughs. So I also realized that my husband, this actor, that the role he played throughout this period, no longer matters in fact. Translator. She recognized or felt that in reality this whole way of treating her, etc., it was his role, it was just a role. In fact, with all this experience and feeling, she has just discovered today that she is ABBA. She thinks she has already spoken enough about her heart. She appreciates it. Beloved, may grace fill you. Participant: thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. What you have expressed in very simple words is the pure truth. From the moment you accept that everything you have experienced, as you have said, is not true, without denying it, it allows you today, with proof, to discover that you were an actor or an actress, and what is understood and sees that does not pass through your head, what I call being of the order of understanding, does not pass through an analysis, nor through concepts, but through the evidence that is there from the moment you look at it. Today you find yourself in what IDADE called, the witness or observer of the theatrical scene in which you were actress, called your attention. The observer or witness today becomes, for each one of us, the eternal being. It is this state in some way that they are rediscovering today, having left out their person, not denying it, but accepting to see it. Obviously, today is enough to tear off the last veil. It does not remain now, and from now on, as for all who live it, but to accept to be the actor until the end, while at the same time being the observer, who also disappears by himself, to give way to your essence, which can only resonate and identify, beyond any form as well as any world, with Agape. ABBA is nothing more than that, which makes you resonate with the truth and allows you to let go, as you said, from one moment to another, the belief in the idea of being that character. Then all you have to do is let everything develop, because from now on, and you have said it yourself, you discover that you are ABBA, and that there is only Agape. The rest is not denied, nor is it rejected, but in some way it is crossed with joy. Thus, what you have expressed with your words, provides to everyone who listens and hears, the essential key for the game between the human being, the self and the non-being. So they are in the process of realizing in themselves, as we speak, the fusion of the three into one, which leads to freedom. And there are also countless others, here as elsewhere, to see that there is a before and after, and as you put it so well, this before this after no longer extend into the notion of time, but emerge with more and more evidence and more lightness. You only have to leave what is, accept your life as life, because that is what erases and transcends all suffering and eliminates sleep. So you are free of yourself. You will easily notice, in what you will be given to live, you will notice that this different state is your natural state, in spite of all sufferings, in spite of all wanderings, and in this you can say today, I love myself, but not through history, but through the Eternal One, and that is enough to allow you to live more and lighter, more and more easily. So ABBA, I can only wish you the purest, most frank and spontaneous Agape. Remember from now on that your search and your investigation ended at that moment. All that remains for you to do is to live, to go through what must be, and to let the foundation of this eternal being and its natural radiance be strengthened, from where you are to the source itself. Acknowledgements. You really become what was called autonomy, childhood, humility and, above all, truth. Your path is not unique, because it is everyone's path from now on. In these days leading up to what you call Christmas, you will see around you, naturally and spontaneously, what you have described and what you are experiencing. Agape cannot fail, because Agape is the only thing that will never happen, because your eternal am, the one you live today, has always been there. You had simply forgotten it, and now you are free from the theatrical scene, you are free from form, even within that form. It is up to you to embrace every day, with joy, the same peace that you describe, to let it grow by itself, because it can only do so, independently of you, and that is what you are. You agreed, with the click, to be nothing, and especially not to be the actress, and that's what allows you to discover that you are the whole. Her testimony is a perfect illustration of a process that is affecting a multitude of other ABBAs these days. You will also easily notice that although there are sometimes difficult moments or passages within the actress, that the Eternal Am, through Agape, illuminates all this and consumes the rest of the habits, all that remains of this world, and you will also notice that peace will become more and more vast, which inexorably and very quickly leads to this naked joy. This naked joy consists in simply understanding by living it, that all the wounds, all the sufferings, that all that has been experienced in your present life, ultimately, I only intended to make you experience this on that day. And that is the freedom that you will never find again, as you have said, in any relationship, in any enjoyment of this world, because in the eternal being, in this developing agape, there can be no lack. Then you were gathered and available for the great void, for the beatitude, but already as the eternal being and present observer, you can no longer be deceived by the actress you were. So is the grace of agape. Silence. Beloveds, we embrace the next ABBA. Translator. This will begin with a testimony and then a question. Participant. About 2 years I had a very nice story. I was very surprised at home, because one night I had the experience that my heart stopped beating and even breathing. And so, at that moment when I didn't know if I was dying or what was going on, suddenly I felt a very, very powerful vibration or energy, something I had never felt before, and so it went through the soles of my feet and up my whole body to come out at the head level. So in that moment, what I felt, in addition to all the physical sensation, I felt something that is very difficult to express in words, like an enormous joy of living, was the most beautiful and pleasant experience I have ever had. At the same time, I felt a lot of peace and, above all, a lot of joy. At the same time that I was going through all this, I felt like a big explosion in my chest and, at the same time, like a sword that crossed me from one ear to another and created an explosion. From that moment on, I lost track of time, and from that moment on, I heard an inner voice speaking to me and speaking to me from my inner being, and it spoke to me, for example, of certain knowledge on a more universal level. And so, to sum up, I have had this kind of experience for many hours. During the time, I was still, although time was enough, I was aware that I was a person, but at the same time, I did not feel like a person. It's like a feeling of being something very, 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 very big that really regained all existence, all that existed. And, at the same time, this feeling of being really very small, 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 but very, very intense. So that was the experience I had that night, and then, in the following weeks, all that peace and joy, I continued to feel that peace and joy for several weeks afterwards. And so it was for several weeks where I even felt compassion for all the beings around me and also compassion, joy and happiness for myself. And so, with a little more time, a little more weeks, little by little, in terms of intensity, this has diminished a little, with time, it has lasted 2 years. Translator. That joy and inner peace continued afterwards, and your condition is obviously much better after the experience than before. Participant. And so, after all the time, it was 2 years ago, now 3 months ago, I found myself in a much bigger crisis, an existential crisis, and so seeing no event or cause to this crisis, I decided to stop believing in everything, nothing. I thought that the essence did not exist, that the inner being no longer existed, and I didn't even believe in myself, in my own character. So, at first I felt a lot of anger and frustration, and then a lot of sadness, and little by little, I managed to refocus, to find myself inside myself, a month ago, and now I find myself in a state of peace and joy, with a little movement. And therefore, a question now after this testimony. Above all, before you ask your question, there too, in what you have just expressed, you live the eternal, and as you say, it was 2 years ago, and as you lived it, this state, little by little, vanished for a reason that is very simple, because 2 years ago, it was simply impossible, with the best will or the best abandonment, to realize and live the permanence of the eternal Am. Today, in the last few months, things have been profoundly different. The game of life during these 2 years has gradually taken you away from past experiences and has reintegrated you, without you realizing it, into the person. It is part of the comings and goings, it is part of what still had to be purged or eliminated, of what was left of the person. Now that you have passed through it, you can easily see that what has been experienced has been restored. it will never disappear again, for it is no longer an experience or a state, but the truth of your humanity, of your being and of your non-being. Now I hear your question. Participant. Now I find myself with the will to want to rediscover this experience that I had 2 years ago. Beloved, I have just told you before you go on, what you have lived and what you seem to see disappear and is being reinstated, does not need any will on your part to live it, but simply to embrace you in totality, without thinking precisely of the past, thus freeing you from the past experience. The character like the eternal I will be free for the moment. Even in relation to these magnificent experiences you have gone through, you will never be able to relive them in the same way, especially if, as you naturally do, it is not a reproach, there is a need to relive what you have gone through. But today, the circumstances are not the same, not your circumstances, but the circumstances of the earth. Then you have to forget what was experienced in the past, because what is promised to you today, if you let go of what has happened, no matter how marvelous it may have been, then you are ready to live it with a different intensity and let it settle. You have nothing else to do but embrace and let develop what is happening in relation to this. But it will calm down, permanently. So don't delay this by thinking about your past. Free yourself for the moment, free yourself for the present joy, without memory, nor nostalgia for that past moment, and from the moment you accept it, then you live it. I think you haven't finished your question. Participant. No. This will is not controlled, emerges suddenly and surprises me. How can I stop this will that cannot be controlled or that is not controlled, that emerges suddenly, that it is this will to return? It is a reflex, is this will too? Translator. To go back in time, to relive the experience. But the experience is there, as soon as you accept it, not to pray, to ask, or to meditate, but simply to live in the present. Be lucid and present in your simplest life, in your daily activities, be the most present for yourself. Do not take care of the rest as a person and enjoy precisely those moments in which you are busy with something other than thinking about what you have experienced, and they will be there. Let us remember that 2 years ago it was not possible, except on rare occasions for some beings, to establish the permanence of this. So since you express it so well, you see the weight of this past, even if it is suffering or joy, it makes no difference, because there is nothing to fear or seek. Really consider that this is behind you and that from the moment you stop, by the intention and humility of your presence in every daily act, then you will let the welcoming take place by itself. As you experienced it 2 years ago, I repeat this phrase which has all its meaning, it is never the person who is liberated, but it is you who are liberated from your person, and the surest way today to settle into the permanence of what was experienced 2 years ago, is, in effect, in total acceptance, in the daily action, whatever it is, to be fully present, because in that moment you free yourself from your past, even if it is the most pleasant, and then you settle spontaneously, naturally and effortlessly, in the sense that you're beyond this character, but as long as you seek to revive him, you can only walk away from it. Freedom is only in the present, it will never be in what has been experienced, even if it is the most dazzling event that exists and the strongest. Do not ask for anything, be present yourself fully, even within this person, with a strong attention and lucidity of what you do, even within everyday life. This will eliminate the past by itself and make you live agape. Of course, there are countless techniques to calm the past, without the need to return to it. There are countless ways, but the most important thing is not to deal with the past, but to live the instant. Because the moment is enough by itself for you to live it fully, not as an experience or a state, but as your true agape identity. You have here the illustration that we are all, without exception, still marked, even if it does not affect us, by the weight of collective history and by the elements of memory that you call memories, which are not simply memories, but are active in our present by the simple fact of looking at them, thus diverting us from the present instant, which is not in the same context as the testimony of our former sister and, paradoxically, our former sister who had not lived anything before this, and lives it today. You have lived it, in an individual and not a collective moment, but the very memory of this joy creates a distance from the innate joy. If you accept this, with nothing more to ask or do, then you will be open in abundance and it will never go away again. But you cannot find, even in your memory, despite the intensity of experience and memories, to relive the past moment. Once again, do not try to eradicate these thoughts from the past, but settle firmly into the present instant. And this is easier when you are busy in your daily life, because the attention given to a daily task, in your case you have already experienced it, will reinstate you. From the moment you look for it, you will see that this piece will disappear, and that from the moment you stop looking or asking, when the nostalgia has disappeared, then you will be available for Agape. The character's game is just a construction of the story and a projection of a hypothetical future. The past and the future do not exist within Agape. In reality and concretely only the intensity of the present exists. Accept this, experience it and understand it by living it. You don't need anything else after all. Did you get it? Participant: yes. Thank you very much. We thank you for expressing it and, of course, you have expressed it yourself, but through you, through every brother or sister who listens and hears, and the resonance of ABBA, here or elsewhere, absolves and frees you from all this, through his loving listening and his unconditional acceptance of what you have just expressed. So go in peace, may peace, love and joy become your daily life, there is nothing else. And this cannot be done as the days go by, as I told you, in your daily life, but from this moment on, if you accept it. We thank him for allowing us to embrace him. Silence. Beloved, let us continue. Translator: we have a new person arriving. Participant: since 2013, a sound has been installed in my ears, because it has always continued, at no time has it stopped, so it goes up, down, goes from one ear to another, and sometimes it is a very high-pitched sound that really bothers me in my ears, to such an extent that I am forced to lie down, to put myself in complete darkness until the moment when I can fall asleep. It is a testimony. Beloveds, what they call whistles is, of course, what is called the nothing, that is, the song of the soul, which is part of what our Eastern brothers call the siddhis, or powers of the soul. This sound, perceived alternately, to the left or to the right, with different tones and intensities, as you have said, actually corresponds to the mandates of light, because in some cases, in fact, the sound becomes so wide and sharp that there is no alternative but, as he has said, to lie in darkness and disappear for oneself. But the sounds that you perceive, for those who perceive them today, all of you have noticed these variations in tone and amplitude, going into a very high-pitched whistle. The nothing or song of the soul has 7 different tones. What you express that you are living is the command of the light, but also that penultimate sound, being the last sound, what was called the heart of the angels, in which you seem to hear the hearts of thousands of children, accompanied by violins. You're all at the beginning of this, some of you have already had the opportunity to experience it, and when you hear this, you are taken to the throne of truth. So it is a preparation that is accelerating for many. There are forms of yoga that allow you to resonate with these sounds. You will find this in what was called Kriya Yoga or Siddhis Yoga, too. But today you don't need exercises, you really have to respect this mandate of light when it happens. As I said, the calls and requirements of light, for many of you there is not much room left to live an ephemeral life. The light that you are is found in its totality and truth, literally separating you from the idea of believing that you are a person or a story. These sounds are nothing more than the translation of soul contact and then an outpouring of spirit, which induces the turning of the soul, as well as its consummation into the joy of the bliss of spirit. Do you have anything to add or ask about it? Participant: no, thanks to you. Silence. We can continue. Translator: a person approaches. Participant: lately, I've been losing my sense of direction, but in places I know very, very well, and suddenly I'm getting lost. I disappear, I don't know where I am, and then I panic and have no idea how to get out. I don't know if it's Alzheimer or what it is. It would be an Alzheimer of light then, because this process is experienced by countless brothers and sisters, even very young. It's part of the same sentence that I just said, the light wants you entirely. First of all, it is a loss of a spatial reference point, and I tell all of you not to worry, because some of you have already experienced it. There may be times, even within a day, when you lose, even if you are lucid, the sense of your identity, that is, when you wake up or at some point in the activity you are carrying out, suddenly, you wonder where you are. Beyond the normal preoccupation with neurological problems, and we can only assure you that we are countless in living it, and that, of course, we have all thought of this disease, and I fully understand that by living it as countless brothers and sisters, because sometimes it happens to me, on foot or in the car, suddenly, all at once, because I no longer know where I am, who I am, or who is driving. This process is completely normal. It is the disappearance of the ephemeral, the disappearance of what you are, of the person and of this world. So, of course, it can be frightening and confusing, but no matter how intense this particular aspect of what doctors call temporary spatial disorientation actually results for the person in a much more serious illness than Alzheimer or a neurological disorder, it is simply his disappearance as a person and his disappearance from this world that is beginning to happen. There will come a time, whether by sound or disorientation or any other mechanism, somehow you will be forced, in appearance, to lie down, to close your eyes, and if you nod, then you will grow into joy or grow into eternity. You will make yourself present to the truth and be absent from the person or place. I repeat to you that this is a normal process in the process of liberation and in the process of ascension. The light finds all possible ways to touch and marry you because, in the end, only you find yourself. Here also, in what you have just witnessed, it is exactly the same process that takes place through different manifestations, but inevitably leads to the final agape, the one that will never have an end, but the final agape of the character who is, as I have said, a total consummation, a consummation of love, joy and bliss. Everything else will seem quite useless to you, be it your possessions, your stories, your attachments. There can be no resentment or feeling of loss, but only a fullness and joy without object, which will put an end to the questions, to the panics which can in fact be very illogical, not knowing who you are anymore and where you are. Of course, this is confusing, and when you experience it, when the person rests, then there will be no panic. It is so, and in a great burst of laughter, you will definitely leave the illusion. There is no other way out of illusion, no matter what the previous elements are. At some point, the agape will end its transmutation of all that is ephemeral. As I have repeated countless times, this process is inexorable. Whatever your panic, whatever your symptoms such as whistles or other symptoms, whatever your visions of future are, you will soon realize that in agape, there is no place for anything, for any form, for any becoming, simply in the instant, beyond any history. And in that moment, each of us will be completely satisfied and will realize that, regardless of the panics or the difficult moments, the wounds and memories or the visions of a new land or other dimensions, agape will put an end to all the claims of any future or to the persistence of any identity. Whoever lives agape will never forget it. We had the testimony of a sister who lived repentant of what she lived. Today is different. If you accept this, if you enjoy these moments, if it can happen to you at home and even if it happens to you outside, look for a bench, sit down. If you're in your car, don't try to solve anything, close your eyes, don't move, and agape will be there instead of panicking, instead of asking. It may seem so simple, and yet it is. Love is simple, and often panic or questioning about a temporary spatial disorientation or even about the identity that we are, after the first reactions, you will notice that you will install yourself easily, in this objectless joy, which does not depend on any history, any future, any world, in any way. Silence. Are you calm now? Participant. It also happens to me when I speak. When the simplest words don't come out, I get lost and I don't even know what I'm talking about. Well, beloved, here I also reassure you, you are not the only one, and this happens even to young people. This process will be generalized, it will occupy more and more of your time, and this is also how you disappear from illusion and the ephemeral to find yourselves in the beloved heart of God, in the source, in the abode of supreme peace and in beatitude. The evidence of what I am telling you, for each one of you, will become clearer and clearer, because beyond the first worries or panics, you will find that you will laugh at it yourselves. Because it is precisely this form of disorientation, of loss of identity as well as loss of words that sets you free. As I have said, face to face and one to one, the meeting of the ephemeral and the eternal, inexorably led to this, and this concerns all of humanity and not just humans. For those of you who have so-called domestic animals, you can easily see a change of behavior in so-called domestic and even wild animals, as if the heart-to-heart resonances within the animals of nature, as the animals in your house, were the same process, and it has been said, the lion will walk with the lamb, the cat will embrace its prey instead of devouring it. This process will also run until the moment of the event. You'll see it from everywhere, in you and around you. This process, which has already begun, will become increasingly clear to collective humanity. At that time, you will no longer be able to hide from yourself or others the physical reality of your ascension and liberation. You will be literally unhooked, not by any will, but by the intelligence of the light that you are. There will be no more questioning at that time, there will be no more panic at that time, but only the evidence of bliss. Do you have anything else to add? Participant: no, thank you very much. Thank you. Silence. Other participant: I may have a question. On a practical level, the event should be close, because some symptoms do not facilitate us. For example, this pressure. In practice, OMA had told us about the tearing of the precardium, but in everyday life, in the time that remains to be lived. Beloved, your daily life, our daily life will be reduced to nothing if you prefer, but all of you live it, even without understanding it, and it affects all parts of the planet around you. Check it out. Of course, brothers and sisters do not want to talk about it because they think they're sick, they have a problem, but the daily routine disappears and it is very clear, very short term. For many of you, in the beginning, you will no longer be able to do anything, except be in joy, and what daily life can bear before the intensity of the light. Within the light there is no longer any obligation, there is no longer any justification, and you will live it. You will see for yourself that everything that seemed important to you, such as eating, working, loving, taking care of your daily life and keeping yourself up to date, will very quickly become absolutely impossible, but it will not be necessary to call a doctor at that time, he will be in exactly the same condition as you. Laughs. And besides, you won't be able to call anyone, because everything that is electric just won't work anymore, and as you can imagine, given the intensity of what is experienced by everyone, of course, the event is now. I can't imagine, and I guess many of us can't even imagine that we can still live a normal life, with what you are living now and what we're living now. Until now, as the commander had said, since he used the initial quotation of the precardium, until now you were between one chair or another, that of the ephemeral or that of the eternal. And then you managed to juggle between the two chairs. It is called in French the ass between two chairs, and at some point you will realize that there were never chairs, and at that moment, there will only be joy. Your identity will have disappeared, the world will have disappeared, but you will still be there. The resurrection is the end of death, but also the end of this world, but also the end of the dream of creation, and as I have had the opportunity to say, who can prefer daily life to this world of light, living agape? This is your common destiny, without exception, and, of course, you have noticed that it is the whistles, the testimony of your sister. There will come a time when it will occupy all the space, all the time, and all your life, but it is not a death, it is a resurrection. I remind you that this is where you died, in this world, contrary to what you can still think and see. But with Agape, you will no longer be able to think and see anything. And of course, it is difficult to imagine, given the increase in number and intensity of this process that you are living and describing, what could be extended in time, or else there will be no one left to ensure anything on this planet. I have always said that this is inexorable, inevitable, that it is continuous. The event has already begun for some of you. It becomes more and more collective, and at some point, the event will be there, but you will no longer be there, you will be in Agape. This has been called ecstasy and explained to me how, having experienced the resurrection in his flesh, how you can still imagine or pretend to leave Agape. I can assure you that you will not have any desire or any possibility, you will be life. It is not a death, it is a resurrection, it has nothing to do with it, and the sacrifice, which normally in the logic of light is necessary before, is done today by itself. Whatever you say, think what you think, and nothing can oppose it, on earth as it is in heaven. And as I said, it starts tomorrow, but you can still look for a date, in relation to the event, to live Agape. In addition, many may be, before the collective event, in the coming days, if they have not already done so, unable to move, unable to do anything, and simply remain, even if they do not wish, in this state of bliss. And who can still want or hope for something, when the ecstasy of Agape is effective in all. And I very much doubt that anyone, whatever their current denial, has the desire to reappear within a form or a new world. The experience that everyone is living, in whatever intensity and form, inevitably led them to this, more and more every day. Who could still prefer daily life, or even a world called the world of light, to the truth of Agape? I do not even accept bets, for there will be no one left to pay me. Laughs. Is that clear? Answer: yes. Does something bother you inside the person who disagrees? Answer: no, it's obvious. We agree, and more of you, even without talking about it, are living it, especially because there is a form of modesty for those who do not know what it is, but when the last veil of Agape is torn, you can only see what our sister said in the first testimony this afternoon. Silence. In the same way, this has been extensively explained by Sri Aurobindo, with the 5 stages of humanity's clash, and, individually, you may be going through acceptance. Anger has ended, denial, negotiation. Those who are still negotiating are those who still have experiences of consciousness, who see the new world, the new dimensions, and when they see that there is nothing to see and that love takes everything, who among them can still think of keeping consciousness somewhere, because during the ecstasy of Agape, they will clearly see that consciousness is a disease. Silence. When I have said throughout the months, since February of this year, you can see today that you are living it. In fact, there is no one there. In fact, creation is a dream. In fact, there is only love, and it is happening now. Once again, whatever you think, whatever you see are legitimate apprehensions. As I said this morning, you still have to live what life makes you go through, but you will be unable to oppose yourself less and less. Ultimately, Agape will be there. The shock of humanity has been deeply muffled. Whatever you observe, both in your life and on the surface of the world, has no weight against Agape. Silence. Beloveds, let us continue. Participant: Beloved ABBA, my heart follows the rhythm of your words. I have the impression that I will have to call a doctor, because my precardium will break. That's good, there are doctors here, but it's beyond any medical resource. Participant: I would like to thank a master that I had a few years ago, that everything I am experiencing right now he had told me a few years ago, and now I am living it completely. I am waiting, with all my love, for the event that we must all live together, and I share all this love with all those who are there. Thank you all. Beloved ABBA, we thank you. You know that countless brothers and sisters, who listen to us or who will listen to us, are experiencing exactly the same things. It is in this way that the testimonies of your experiences calm concerns, calm what remains of the person. You're really in the embrace and in the heart of the event. Silence. If you are lucky enough not to be called too much by the light, and if you live this peace, this joy, it is important that you are present, beyond any word. Even if your daily life is allowed, in your personal case, then use it, so that Agape spreads around you. As I said a few months ago, it was an epidemic and then a global pandemic that will not forgive anyone. Whatever the suffering of the scene or the character of the theater, all this will end in a big laugh. It is the strict truth, and you live it, and you will live it. Silence. Do you have anything else to add? Participants: no, thanks to you. So we can continue if we have time. You decide the rest. Translator: a question that comes. A question that comes with a decisive step. Laughs. There's a person coming. Participant: knowledge makes us slaves, wisdom frees us to pay taxes. Tax is death. Is it Agape? From the moment of death. Translator: from love, I apologize. Laughs. Well, beloved, can you imagine that if you're in Agape, no check can be filled out alone? I remind you that there will be no electricity anyway, so don't worry about predators. They will also have other things to do than try to send you to a sheriff. As long as your life allows it, it obeys your obligations, but there will come a time when no obligation can stand, and, of course, by living it, you will see for yourself, and even if your person no longer exists, you will live that you owe nothing to anyone, and that you are not responsible for anything in this theatrical scene. What a check can represent, what a house can represent, what a need to eat can represent, in front of Agape. Nothing. You'll see it more and more easily, and also in case of anxiety for some event of your life. If you take the habit of embracing and remaining immobile, closing your eyes, you'll see at the speed of the previous thought, the previous limitation, that simply no longer exists. You will laugh at that. You will laugh at this real and concrete subjugation of what we call society, because what you call social organization, you know, is based only on trust. This is the same in your financial institutions and in all human relationships. This trust is simply an ascent unleashed into your own slavery. If I had to say something about politics and this world, I would say that Agape is a total anarchy. What do you want to be interested in? Your body, your life, to write a check, your food to prepare, the need to warm up, when you consume yourself from within. Be logical. No one will be able to oppose it. You are simply in the period of the event, and in fact, there are different understandings, which do not pass through knowledge, but through this wisdom, through this love wisdom, which has no use for the laws of society, because, as I said, the law of one, Agape, has no use for all the madness of this world. When you become life, you see the total stupidity of the enslaved human being, and you see it on the screen of the world, that slavery, even with violence, must cease, because Agape is everywhere, even among those who have not yet lived it consciously. In the same way that you can try, as you have said, forms of panic sometimes, of anxiety. Well, those who simply feel this need for freedom, even applied in their lives in this world, can only come into confrontation with those who bribe, lock them up and deceive them. You can find a very simple analogy, because I assure you it is exactly the same. When you raise animals, to feed yourself, in so-called industrial structures, you do exactly what the Akans and their servants do with you. And that to live it now, through the illumination of light, without necessarily living Agape, can only lead to the loss of trust, and I would even say it was time to lose trust. Of course, the outburst of violence, beyond appearances, only reflects a need for poorly expressed freedom. The primary anomaly has dissolved, all that contained the old world simply no longer exists. What you see is the agony of illusion, what you are also experiencing, and the return of splendor, the eternal one, who has never moved and who has always been there. and who could, in the face of that, want to pretend to write a check or live in a new matrix, even of light? What I expressed a few months ago about what I called uncreation is simply the awakening of the dream of creation. And that you are going to experience it, that you are already experiencing it. It is not a concept, nor a projection towards the future, it is the reality of the instant. And as we said before, if you try to project yourself, given the intensity of the process, you will see very well that it doesn't work. This world disappears, it was a dream or a nightmare, and only life will remain. What I call life is not a form, it is not a solar system, it is a blessing. Everything else has no substance. In fact, I do not see, objectively, how this process could last beyond a few days or a few weeks. Otherwise, this world will be covered with people who are in bed, unable to do anything, and there will be no one to awaken anyone to return to the old world. At that moment, you will begin to laugh, and we will all laugh together at the futility of this world and the utter futility of the dream of creation. The giantist mothers, who are the creators, will wake up at the last moment. I remind you that it was they who created the dream, and I also remind you that it is the Dracs, the Ekans, who allow the end of the dream at this time. Unlike previous cycles, no matrix can be reformed in this world, because it will no longer exist, as in any other world, as in any dimension that has ever existed. Think about it, who can prefer his life to live Agape? They are living it right now, even if it is sometimes uncomfortable, as some testimonies have mentioned, but very quickly only Agape will remain. One can no longer dream of creation, one can no longer dream of any identity, everything will really take place on earth as in heaven, from the most material dimensions to the throne of heavenly Jerusalem. That is why the way to live Agape today is to embrace, whatever happens, whatever resentments you may have about the story that was made to play in the dream, because you will be so awake that this dream will fade away very quickly, and everything you say today ultimately only reflects this process. Silence. Beloved. Translator. We have, if you agree, the time of pause. I agree with everything you want. So, let's calm down, soon I'll say we're stuck, and I'll tell you in a few moments. Through Jean-Luc Ayoun. The Transformations. French transcript. Agape team. Spanish translation. DeepL.com. Home revised, LMF.